I think what's happening is science fiction is becoming nonfiction.
Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
Welcome to Brick by Brick. I'm Jason Reichl. I'm joined with Keith today. We're going to be having a conversation about AI, the responsibility of AI, and how you govern it. Welcome to Brick by Brick, Keith. Nice to see you, man.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Why don't we give a little introduction of your background? You've worked within the industry for quite a while in interesting emerging roles. So why don't you give a rundown of your background?
So I'm the Vice President of Privacy and AI Governance for a company called ACT. So if you're familiar with educational testing, the ATC exam. And we have multiple products. That's probably the most famous, but we're a worldwide company. We're in about 100 countries. So a lot of it's learning data. So that's what my team and I focus on is data privacy, data protection, AI governance, and then most recently, third-party risk management. But I've been in IT for nearly 30 years, starting out kind of on the technology side as an infrastructure manager in the automotive supply chain, moved into government doing enterprise architecture, and then into health insurance doing enterprise architecture, IT strategy, roadmaps for about 10 years. And then prior to joining ACT, I was the privacy officer at Duke University.
So Keith, you have a risk management IT background for the ages here. You've kind of gone through every major institution where risk is an incredibly important part of the equation. Privacy is a very important part of that equation. And now AI. So I'm very excited to get talking to you about our topic here. The first thing that came up in my mind was, I don't think your title 5 years ago was AI, right? So let's describe the journey from data management, IT, to now being responsible for AI. And is that a natural fit and where you think it should fit within all organizations? Or is that just right for ACT? Let's go kind of into that transition period.
Yeah, so I'll just start, when I was at Duke, I was actually hired as the IT risk officer for the university and the health system. And then GDPR came along and was working with a coworker who was on the compliance side, but didn't know much about the privacy data governance side. And I had that experience previously. So I ended up inheriting privacy, helped establish a program doing privacy impact assessments. And then for ACT, I joined as the privacy officer to help set up the privacy program, specifically data privacy. So I work with a privacy lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer by trade, more on the technology stack. And we also, within ACT, have a measurement and research team that hires psychometrics, statisticians, and so forth. So they're wanting to leverage AI. And we realized, given that the amount of personal information we have from learners and from families, if we're going to use AI, we probably need to establish a governance committee, which we did. And I'm actually reporting into the general counsel, but previously I was reporting into operations along with IT. Reorg, we got purchased, we moved from a nonprofit to for-profit. And so it just made more sense for security, which I had for a while, to go into IT, and I went into legal. And I think we're following the industry trends of a lot of the AI governance because of its legal components. It's more of a natural fit within privacy than in the other groups. And because I am the privacy officer and I report to legal, I have some autonomy and independence. So I can then challenge and support what the business is doing without the influence of, other leadership or other decisions. So I think it's a good fit for us. And I think that's probably where the industry is best aligned at the moment.
I mean, you open yourself up to a lot of legal risks, which we can get into, that don't really have solid solutions yet around what to do if those things occurred. So I think it's impactful the way that you guys are organized. What specific risks has ACT encountered or anticipates it might encounter as it integrates AI into your processes? So what things are you considering today?
Yeah, so several things that we've done. One is, we're one of probably the largest data stores for educational information. So we have a couple 100 million records from students dated back, in the past. We're in 22 states. So every year we're adding more and more data. We also want to leverage that data because we want to influence state and national policy regarding education. But we also want to leverage AI to comb through that information to find patterns that we may not have had the expertise or the resources for. And so part of the risk is, okay, how do we enable that, but at the same time, not expose it, not have, hallucinations where patterns are made up. And so what we're doing with the establishment of an AI governance committee is coming up with policies and procedures, policies around the use cases for when you can use the data, how you can use the data, and then also the procedures for what's the best way to manage the data lifecycle within AI to make sure that it's giving us the output we need, but it's responsible, it's ethical. And so that's kind of where we are at the moment. And we have a secured enclave with a vendor, one of the big ones. I'm not going to name names, but essentially that allows us to do a lot of our work with strong controls. And the data doesn't leave our company and go back and feed their models. It just feeds ourselves internally. And that allows us now to grow kind of organically and train people on its usage. And if that capability, or if there's capability that's not available in that particular platform, then you can go through the normal technology request process and procurement, and we will add that particular AI-enabled application into our portfolio so that you can actually download it once it's approved.
So it sounds like you're handling you're including the tech process to be able to catch corner cases, maybe that you guys are emerging trends within the AI space, right? You're using processes and policies to control data and what's exposed. So that makes sense. What about enablement? Are you guys going through, do employees who want to use these tools have to go through training? Do they have to go through verification? What's that look like today for you guys?
Yeah, so we have two different environments. So through the browser, Microsoft Copilot, we have a relationship with them so that we can enable just the company. So people can actually, at all levels in the company, go use Copilot.
For managing like tasks and things like that, work that they have.
Yes, task-based.
Not using company data, but just using AI as a enhancement tool.
Right, for administrative purposes only. Then we also have a 365 license, which is Copilot by Microsoft, which is a secured enclave. And that allows us to leverage it within the Microsoft Office tools. And then we're also using Azure. We're a Microsoft company for the most part. And so upon approval by management and proper use cases, we will then allow people to use Copilot 365 to begin to establish use cases. And we have a list on our AI governance website where we post what use cases people are using, what prompts are they using, to your point, to generate enthusiasm and curiosity to use that and come up with new use cases. And so we meet as a committee about every 6 weeks, but we have other task groups that meet about every 2 weeks, and we share what we've learned, right? And we encourage people to try new things. So most companies, I think, start with a red light and then work towards green. We have a secured enclave, so we're green until we need to turn red because we want the adoption. We realize this is going to be transformative, and we want everyone within the company to have that opportunity.
Let's talk about, one of the things that I heard you talking about previously when I was just reading through your LinkedIn at RIMS is the importance of document and organization, which is what you were just talking about, is that you have a website that users can go to where they can get use cases, prompts, all of this. Have you seen, since you've launched that, let's call it a product for lack of a better word, that product, have you seen increase in AI usage? Have you seen your company and your teammates become more literate in that process?
Yes. So on our AI governance website, we actually have links to various YouTube videos. In addition to our policies, our procedures, our use cases, we have an Excel spreadsheet where we track what's acceptable technology that's been approved. And then we actually recently have annual compliance training, and we actually had a 30-minute AI tutorial that people had to go through at all levels in the company that introduced them to what is AI, how is it best used, what are some of the challenges that we have within the company, how best do we use it. And so we are leaning into leveraging AI training compliance throughout the whole company because we realize the nature of our work lends itself very nicely, whether it be creation of content, exam creation, taking in and absorbing the information from the exams themselves, from the students, and then working through a lot of that data to help our learners have career paths, whether it's college bound or workforce bound. We want to be able to enable all the learners and have a career path for success.
So, when you first start talking about this, I'm thinking about all the people, data scientists within your team, people that build all that. What about development of your tools? Are you guys using AI in the development process now for your teammates?
Yeah. So we actually, and maybe this is an example, because of the exam, the ACT exam, there's a written portion. And it used to be that we would have to have 2 human readers go through each one and evaluate. We actually have AI being used as one of the readers and then a human as another. We will probably never use two AIs because we want humans in the loop, but we're able to now, at a lower cost, get through a lot more of the exam reviews than we would previously. So that is a use case that we're doing specific to kind of the grading and the scoring of our exams.
Are your employees as excited about what AI is bringing to the table as the organization is for transformation? Or are there some tips you've learned on how to roll this out to employees and internal folks?
Yeah, great question. It's mixed. I think you're going to have some early adopters. The data science and the research team have been great at adoption, probably going faster than we can manage because they want to kick the tires on it and see what the value is. For the others who might be reluctant or maybe not as technology savvy, those are the people that we are meeting with usually in team meetings within the business unit and just giving demos of what you can do with Copilot in the browser and Bing and how that could be used. So we mentioned the task level, creation of an email, establishing maybe an Excel document with pre-categories and so forth, and getting them to think through, okay, how can I leverage this, especially on the task base that are human involved, that take quite a bit of time? How can we automate that? And through automation, then we can free up your time to do other more value added. And so we're taking different angles, different business units, depending on receptiveness. And so a number of things are happening at once. So it's keeping us busy, but at the same time, we are beginning to drive value with the adoption of AI at all levels.
You know, one thing I ask people who use this term is, as your role as being on the AI governance team and running that for your organization, there's a lot of talk about responsible AI. And what does that mean? What does responsible AI mean to you? What frameworks do you use, or how do you guide what responsibility means?
Yeah, so at the moment, because it's still early stages, if you want to use learner personal information, or you want to use intellectual property, or you want to create content, that has to be approved first, and then we'll apply it. We're not using it for production. We're only using it to test capabilities because we realize that after we create an exam, if we use AI, we need to let people know that this was generated or at least support development by AI. We're not there yet. Additionally, we're making sure that in our quality assurance, as we're building our models, we're actually testing the output of those models. Is it ethical? Is it biased? Are the tools, can prompt injections occur? So using OWASP like you would on a web app, they have similar approaches for detecting challenges within AI models, vulnerabilities. We're doing that as well.
Thinking about other mid-sized organizations, before we go into the questions from the audience, who are just starting, who are not as mature in your organization. You know, I've talked about 3 organizations that are as mature as your organization, to be honest, like where they've already put a governance process in place. They've already put training material out for their employees. So you're ahead of the curve there. But if you were going to go into another organization that had none of this, what's the first thing that you would start doing?
Most likely get executive buy-in. Once you begin to explain the value proposition, what the cost but the return on that spend would be, and then identify some low-hanging fruits that you can apply it to do kind of a proof of concept, that's probably what I would start with. Because I think once you demonstrate the value, people begin to realize, oh, there's a lot more opportunity here. Let's look for ways that we can leverage this that we haven't thought about in the past. But the executive buy-in, like most initiatives, is probably the first thing I would focus on.
Amazing. Here's a question from the audience. How do you evaluate and quantify AI-related risks differently from traditional operational or cybersecurity risks?
So I have a background in risk quantification. And so when we're evaluating the risk, and I'll just give you an example of what we can do. For educational related records, the average cost to the company is about $150 to $300 per record. And that cost is all inclusive, both in terms of initial cost of reparation, recovery, and so forth. And then also secondary loss might be legal fees, regulatory fines. And so what we approach risk from in most cases is to come up with scenarios, because the scenarios usually paint what are your threats, what vulnerabilities do you have, what countermeasures do you have in place, so what are your controls? And that gives you the residual risk. And from there, we can quantify that through statistical means with Monte Carlo simulations and so forth. What that allows us to do is to get away from what we think it's a high risk, medium risk. We actually have numbers behind it. So I can go to the executives and say, there's a probability of 40 to 50% that we might incur a loss of X dollars. But if we add remediation or controls, in this case for AI, we might be able to lower that risk to a tolerance level that is acceptable to leadership.
And is the tolerance level between, let's say, financial, compliance-based risk, insurance-based risk, cyber risk, do you look at all of those the same? So can you now measure for you personally AI risk right alongside financial risk or right alongside anything else with those models?
The answer is yes, but not to the extent that we can with other technologies because they're just been around longer. But, we can use this whether we're evaluating a vendor for a particular control. How much is our spend? What do we think will actually lower our risk toward? And then we have conversations around, well, what data and what volume are we looking at? If it's public information, we don't really care. If it's confidential or sensitive, which is usually PII, learner data, employee data, yeah, we're going to give up. Our tolerance level will be different. So it really depends on who's the audience. And we now have an enterprise risk management committee in which senior leadership that we can bring a lot of our risk discussions as well as opportunities to them so that we can help with prioritization and resources availability and execution.
That hasn't always been the case, right? That risk management's been at that level in organizations where they've been being talked about. It's like the increase in cybersecurity issues, the complexity of operational models changing, and AI that's sort of elevating risk, right? I think it's a great time to be a risk manager right now. Now, there are a number of risk managers that are like, Jesus, I came up through my company construction. I was a safety manager. I got promoted to risk. And now you're telling me I have to manage cyber and AI and all of this stuff. And I'm kind of lost in it. But I would say that if really understanding your models and your risk matrix and really working to define your risk appetite, I think is, the next 10 years journey for organizations. And I really believe that we're going to start to see organizations really actually know what that looks like and know what risk percentage they're operating on in every category.
Yeah. And to your point, cyber risk as we know it today has only been around 15, 20 years, really in the mainstream. Whereas, property and casualty has been around for hundreds of years, right? Starting with insurance, a lot of that started with ships, right? Back in the 1700s. Which path would I take in order to avoid a weather disaster or pirates? And breaking up the cargo so that you at least had a high probability that something would be delivered on time. We're kind of in the infancy there, and AI even more so, kind of embryonic at the moment. But we do know there's risk, because we know that there's uncertainty about what we're doing. We know some of the outcomes may not be favorable. So it's full speed ahead, but slow, fail fast. And so that's kind of what we're beginning to manage that trade-off.
Some people are talking about, you mentioned something which I totally agree with, which was a lot of organizations, especially in the spaces where we work, which is construction, manufacturing, those kind of things. They have a red light policy and they're working towards a green light. I don't think that's a smart move for organizations. Yet, when I ask them why, it's often that the vendors in the AI space are putting all of the risk responsibility onto the businesses themselves to manage this. Do you think that these businesses owe stronger contractual obligations to their vendor? Do you think that the providers need to mature in the way that they are trying to bring this to market as well? Or what have you experienced trying to buy these softwares and do it in a controlled way?
And it's been that model. So most software companies don't want liability. So whatever means they can take, they will probably pass that on to the customer, the client. I noted that in legislation, or at least I think the current administration is considering a ban on any enforcement for AI for the next 10 years. That's going to be problematic. I understand they want to encourage people to do it, but you can't encourage people to drive fast in a car if you don't have safety features. We have to kind of have consideration for that. A lot of the data brokers, they're in the business of selling data and leveraging that for their model development and creation of marketing campaigns and so forth. They're not incentivized to manage AI. So in some regards, they're not culpable. But I can also understand that we as a company at ACT, we're responsible for our learners because they entrust us with their information. And we have to make sure that we're using it, as we mentioned before, in a responsible, ethical, and a means that matches the consent that they provided us for the purpose of processing their information.
Do you see AI insurance or AI exposure becoming a line of insurance that people are going to be able to buy? Are you seeing that already start to emerge yet?
I'm not seeing that emerge, but it would surprise me at some point. I think if you look at a lot of the third-party attestations like a SOC 2 for controls for your operations for technology, I think they will probably have a section on AI. And I mentioned, we're doing third-party risk management. We're beginning to ask questions of our vendors. How are you using AI? Are you using it to process our information? If so, let's have a discussion so that we understand what controls you have in place. Are you doing proper testing? What's the output, et cetera? So I think because AI is going to be so pervasive in almost everything we do, I think we're going to have some hard decisions and discussions around the risk, liability, ownership, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's play a game of risky or too risky. How about that?
Sure.
So I think I know the answer on some of these because we talked about them, but let's start with this one. Using generative AI to draft student assessments without human review, risky or too risky?
At the moment, too risky.
Too risky. We already talked about this. We need a human in the loop. I totally agree. I think that we should be using these models sort of like a heat map system where we're generating outputs, but we're putting it in front of it. So I'll give a story from my product background. I think is really interesting because what I can do now is take a use problem that I have and create 3 prototypes where I used to have to commit to one or just talk to users, right? Create 3 prototypes, get feedback on all 3, and then make a better decision. But I still think that where AI says today, you should not allow AI to draft and put anything out in the space without a human review. Letting third-party vendors train their models on your data, even if anonymized, risky or too risky?
If anonymized, and by anonymized, there's no way to re-identify the data, no problem.
I agree. I think this is something that people need to be working on, which is how do you supply your vendors with what they need in order to be successful? I think a lot about the construction use case or manufacturing use case. I think a lot about governance in schooling, teaching, those kind of things. So I think you're absolutely right on that. I think as long as you're following good anonymization processes and strategy, I think it's pretty safe at this point in time. Launching a new AI-powered feature before your governance committee has signed off, risky or too risky?
Way too risky.
Let's talk about how do you keep your governance board up on all the latest so that it can actually make good decisions?
Yeah, so we actually have several ways that we do that. One is we meet as a committee about every 4 to 6 weeks. We also have a Teams channel, Microsoft Teams, and we're putting in articles. We're sharing information about what various parts of the business are using AI for, not only for awareness, but maybe even adoption themselves. And then we have a leadership team that's very excited about AI and understands that, it could be, I wouldn't say revolutionary, but strongly evolutionary in the way that we can create and share content and then leverage the feedback from the content, i.e. the exams and the scoring, so that we can actually come up with good data sets for analysis on predictive qualities of education, learning, policy development, etc.
I think that's great. I think having an internal team who's putting out what risks in all areas, a risk management update that includes how the industry is changing, I think is something that far too few organizations actually do on the regular. I think if you're having a governance committee, you have to realize that there's 2 parts of that. There's the part that they commit to. So I strongly believe in governance committees having a principle or something that they work from where it says, hey, I'm going to put so much time a week or hours in a month to actually stay up to date, but then also having the enablement coming from the risk management team on application use and things that are happening in the industry so that everyone at that governance committee shows up ready to have real conversation, I think is something that most organizations are bad at, but the ones that can nail that, and it sounds like you guys have done a great job here, really see the benefits. I think that the work you guys are doing is amazing. Thank you for joining me on the show today. Your history is just so fascinating that you've been through all of these iterative changes. Have you ever seen anything, does AI and what we're about to embark on remind you of any other point in your career, or is this actually an evolution point?
I think what's happening is science fiction is becoming nonfiction. Yeah, we've talked about AI for 50 years, but now it's hitting mainstream and everyone can participate. And I think its adoption and usage is going to be transformative, not only to individuals, but to, cities, states, and countries. So I look forward to it. I just want to make sure that we're doing it right. It's respectful. It's got the privacy hat on now, making sure that people understand its use, its consent to it. And so I think it's got a lot of promise.
Thank you so much, Keith, for joining me on Brick by Brick. Fascinating conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to trustlayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.